So let's continue by rebuilding the Stihl ms200t. Got the case halves apart, so now we have to put the bearings in. Now, the bearings have been in the freezer. I need to heat this, and I'm assuming that it's to the same temperature as the other saws that I do. So let's see if we can get it to temperature. Heat it evenly and slowly without burning anything else up is a good idea. I'm looking for about 250 degrees. Not quite there. .300. So this small case heats up fast. Want to heat the case, not the bearing. Beauty. The bearing's home, and we're going to let this cool. Now, this is an open bearing. It does not have an inner race, so it's a little bit different than the ones I've done in the past. But that should do right nice there. So same deal, make sure it's clean. Nice and hot. Again, above 250 is good. Sometimes this will drop right in. And it didn't, so it needs a tap. A little more heat. Again, not on the bearing, you want it on just on the chassis itself. And we're home. Bearings in there nice. Piece of cake. Let it cool. Next, we'll do the seals. A little bit of sealant on the outside of the seal. Now, this seal does not look like it's going to fit. It's plastic. And the inner part doesn't even look like rubber. So I don't know. I don't know how it expects to actually seal here, but let's use a socket here. So I'm going to do this one a little bit differently, just for giggles. I will credit, there was a guy on the forum that gave me this idea, and I don't remember what his name is right now, but not my idea. A little bit of sealant, put a lag bolt through. So one idea was to use a bolt to pull this seal through, and or to pull the seal down to pull it in, and I'm going to see if I can get that to work. Got a nut, couple of washers, and a socket. As long as it's straight, everything's centered up, Should be able just to crank that on down. So I've got a 1/2-inch ratcheting wrench here, and make sure the whole thing is centered. So ratchet it on down. And the seal is in and installed. So the bolt, washers, and nut trick does work. 5/16 inch bolt, make it a longer bolt, like 2.5 inches, and a socket. This one happens to be 9/16. Seems to fit. So now that the seals are in, we can put the case gasket in and the crank. So what I like to do is make the case gasket just slightly wet with sealer. Or you can just do it to the case itself. As usual, I happen to be using Loctite 518 on this job. I tend to think 515 works just as well. So now we have the cases evenly coated with sealer. Make sure the crank spins free. That's good. A little bit of lube, grease. I don't know if you have to grease this, but I am going to. Gasket goes on. Now we know that the flywheel side is the same side as the oil cap, so the flywheel side will go that direction, and the clutch side will go to this half. These seals, they do stretch, so it looks like you just press this on in. It doesn't look like rubber, but apparently it is. And it just sits down. Apparently the hard part there is not getting it through the seal. Apparently the hard part there is getting it through the bearing itself. Getting that to sit down there. And once that goes through, it's through. Some grease again. Because this is tapered, it's going to make it a little bit easier to push down, I think. Don't forget to make sure this electrical line is lined up. Click, and it just goes down like that. It goes down like that. And then you have to make sure the brass pieces are lined up. The rest of this is indeed lined up. Make sure the gasket looks like it's aligned properly all the way around. Now you start looking for bolts. And just looking at it, it looks like the gasket is not perfectly aligned, so hopefully we can adjust it as needed. Blue Loctite on the bolts. Just want to gently get a couple started. And it looks like the case bolts are, or the case gasket is aligning better as I work with these bolts. I forget how this AV mount was mounted, so don't forget to check your orientation. Case bolts. Don't go all the way. Go. Nice and gentle torque initially. Make sure your electric line can move. Should be able to see the gasket all the way around. Alright, and then by hand, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And double check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Those are your case bolts. As a check to make sure you did everything right. Nice and smooth. Very good. Now it does seem like there's a little bit of side-to-side play in the crank, but because now I'm realizing because the bearings are completely open, there's no inner race really, that's probably not a bad thing. Alright, let's work on getting the top end on and a pressure test. Next thing to do is to actually cut these little tabs off very carefully with a razor. You don't want to create a divot there, otherwise you're going to have a spot that doesn't seal. So here's an OEM piston. I'm going to put this nice new Meteor piston in here. If you're looking for these pistons, you can go to hlsupply.com, or it's actually hlsproparts.com, and the link is in the description of my video. New caber rings, and 2 circlips, which are going to be a pain. So this goes in the orientation of the exhaust. So let's get the cylinder head and see what that means. Okay, so in this orientation, the intake goes that way, the exhaust actually goes that way. So what I have to do is I have to put the piston in so the exhaust goes that direction. What I'm going to do first is put the first circlip in. And these things are going to be tricky. Stihl apparently had to make these circlips impossible, and then Meteor decided that it would be a good idea to use the same impossible design. Ooh, that worked. Okay, so you lay one end in, and then the other end you just take a screwdriver and you grab it and just drag it from this end. That's the best way that I can tell you how to do that. That actually worked. Let's put the needle bearing in. And then we take our wrist pin, line it up, push it home. And by the way, if this video makes this look easy, it's because this has flown across the room 5 times. So what you're going to do is you're going to grab with the right screwdriver, right pliers, you're going to grab with the right pliers like this, and you're going to drag it this way with your thumb here holding it in. Put the circlip in, pliers here, drag that way, and now you're always at risk for this thing still wanting to come right out and get you. Click. That's it. Your circlips are in, the piston's on. New gasket. So the old gasket is about 23 thousandths thick. The new gasket is 21 thousandths. Now we based adjusting the squish off of the old gasket. So I may actually use the old gasket here for measurement purposes, and if we have to tighten it up a little bit, I can go to the new one. And what I'm now going to do is I'm going to put I'm not going to put the rings on yet. Put this in. We're going to set that down, and we're going to check some timing numbers. So I'm going to put just 2 cylinder bolts in here. Now we're going to check squish and get timing numbers. So I've set up my degree wheel, and it rotates real nice. I'm going to look for timing now that I've adjusted squish. It probably isn't going to change that much. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do another video that's going to be much more extensive on getting timing numbers. So I'm just going to get these numbers and see where we end up there. Now the exhaust is closer to 100. The intake is 79. And then the transfers, what I'm going to do with the transfers is I want to actually adjust them. So I'm not going to worry about trying to get them. I'm just going to take the cylinder head off. Let's check squish. Yeah, 23 thousandths. Let's check on the other side. Yeah, 23 thousandths. You know what I might do? I might use that other gasket just to get it to sit down just a little tighter. And the trick is to put a ring put a ring in the cylinder head. Bring this to bottom dead center. And then seat it back down. So I now have my wheel calibrated for top dead center, and I can put that ring exactly where I want it with regard to getting transfer timing. Now, this is a lot easier to do if you don't run a gasket, but I like the idea of running a gasket. So, according to Mastermind's numbers, I want this to be at 124. So I'm going to run this up. 90, 100, 110, 124. Back it off. And then the ring will be exactly where I want it to be. So now the ring is going to show me exactly how much I need to remove. So here's the ring in there, and it shows me how much I need to remove of the transfers to get them to where I want them to be. The blowdown on this is awful long, and again, I'm going to go over timing and everything in a different video, but the blowdown in this is too long, just simply too long. So I'm going to adjust this with the Dremel tool. I'm really not going to change anything else because there's not a whole lot else on here that you really need to change. You can, open the intake and the exhaust, but there really isn't a whole lot of place to go with that. Let's work on putting the cylinder head down for this 200. Before we do that, gotta get the rings on the piston here. So these are caber rings. They come with every Meteor piston. All come with cabers. And basically this is the best aftermarket part you can get. OEM, for the most part, is cost prohibitively expensive. So that's one. Two cycle lube on here is good, or I just put a little 80/40. So you can see what I did to the inside of the cylinder head. I adjusted the transfer timing just a little bit, so that is less of a blowdown. A little bit of a shorter blowdown. This had like 38 degrees of blowdown, something completely crazy. Yeah, it's a little better. At least it should be. And I didn't do too much. I messed with the intake just a little bit, widened it just a shade, and the exhaust, I just mainly cleaned the carbon up. I didn't want to mess with that at all. No scoring in here. I can feel with my fingernail it's all smooth. Now we work on the sealant. So I'm going to put sealant all around the head here. Pay special attention to the sides here because that's the thinnest part. Absolutely crucial before you put it down, got to make sure that these circlips are in there. 1, 2, because if you forget them, you're going to be taking it back off just to check. If you do forget it, something will be amiss inside and you're going to have a bad day. After checking the squish, I think I'll use the thinner gasket. And then the real trick is compressing these rings so that you can actually get this on there. So I've got a zip tie here. Should help. There we go. Sometimes that trick works and sometimes it doesn't, but it did work today. Very nice. Good old-fashioned zip tie. Has a ring compressor. If you want to get a little fancier, you can actually use a piece of soda can inside there with the zip tie, and that actually helps even more. I can look on the intake here and check for the end gap on the rings and make sure it is actually together. Yep, so both of them are. That goes down nice and gentle. Now I happen to be using bolts that are actually Allen head because I'm not so sure where my original bolts went, but these will be fine. It's the same thread size, as long as you're using the same thread size, and you make sure that they're not going to be too long. And on this saw, they're all through-hole bolts, so it doesn't even matter the length. As long as they're long enough and they grab, then you'll be fine. Another trick when you're putting bolts down, a little bit of grease on the end of the Allen, and then it holds better. Take it all the way down and in. Good. Nice thing about using the Allen head bolts instead of the normal steel bolts is I can use these T-handles. I happen to have the T-handles, I don't have the steel one, so 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, double check, 2, 3, 4. Check and see. You see gasket all the way around, goop all the way around. Cool.